The centenary of World War I really, to me, is about how recent it was. This year, my father, if he was alive, would be 100 years old. So it was in his lifetime. It's not ancient history.
100 years ago, there was a guy just like me who was after adventure and travel just like me and was thrown into this extraordinary circumstance where he was fighting for his country, and it made me really think that if I was in that same situation, would I make the same decisions?
I can draw no comparison to the men that fought for Australia in World War I, but I remember the first time I travelled overseas as an 18-year-old to compete for Australia in athletics. I was so nervous, so scared, just being away from home, so I can hardly imagine what it was like for those men to not only be away from their family and friends and their home life, but the idea that they didn't know what confronted them.
When you think about why they were all there fighting together, and it comes back to what? It comes back to how they felt about mateship. I think that's where the word mateship was really born, was all of them being there for their mates, for their country, because they had to deal with so much, and they only had each other to hold themselves up.
It's important to remember the individuals who gave their lives for the lifestyle that we all enjoy today. So the Centenary is a chance to really tell some of those stories and remind people about the sacrifices that others have made for us.
World War I to me is the loss of innocence, and it's a lot of young men, a lot of young lives just thrown at a cause that men in a room thought was a great one. And, you know, families all across Australia and all across Europe and all across the world were torn apart by decisions that were made by men who were ill-informed and ill-equipped to make them.
World War I to me really is just a constant reminder, whenever it's raised, of the absolute futility of war. Has there been a worse event in warfare than that one? And it affected my family in quite hideous ways. And it just runs through my family, like so many Australian families, like a strain of DNA.
They talk about World War I forging Australia into a nation. I think there's still a great debate about whether it's just war that forges a nation, brings us together. But in fact, there's no doubt that World War I was a baptism of fire for those young men and women who went from Australia and New Zealand.
I don't think you can help but look back on World War I and not remind yourself it was one of the greatest catastrophes in civilization, really. I mean, globally, over 16 million lives were lost. Closer to home, over 30,000 Australian soldiers were lost.
It changed the face of politics, and it changed the face of how we conduct warfare and also how we conduct media. So, in a way, it was the end of naivety.
World War I was one of those extraordinary punctuation marks in history that did, on the one hand, draw a line on the past, but helped to shape the future.